coming. Thank you to the campaigns and, of course, the candidates for making time and fitting this forum into their busy schedule. Welcome to the Alaska Aviation Gubernatorial Town Hall. We've got a full house tonight. Glad to see so many familiar faces from all different aspects of the aviation industry. My name is Corey Hester. I'm the Executive Director for the Alaska Airmen Association. And to my left here is Adam White, who is a member of almost every aviation organization known to man and is the current association's government and legislative affairs director. So that's who we are. I also just want to remind everyone in the audience, I know we've got a lot of new faces who aren't members of either organization, whether it's the Alaska Airmen Association or some of our partnering organizations up there. But the Alaska Airmen Association is a nonprofit organization who we do not endorse any political candidate, but rather are providing this forum with the goal of educating our members, our partnering organizations members, and the general public on these candidates' plan and vision for Alaska's aviation community. So again, thank you to our partnering organizations, Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, EAA, Local Chapter 42, Lakewood Pilots Association, Women in Aviation, I see a lot of you here tonight, and then Alaska Air Carriers Association. Thank you to your organizations for participating and being on the debate committee and coming up with these questions. I'd also like specifically to thank the Alaska Aviation Museum in partnership with Alaska Event Services and Creative Lighting and Sound for donating their time, resources, and effort and assisting with this event in an effort to allow us to be able to host it free of charge. So can we give them a round of applause, please? All right, now I'd like to introduce the candidates who were selected off the average of greater than 10% of previous statewide polling. To my right, we have Governor Bill Walker. To Governor Bill Walker's right, we have former U.S. Senator Mark Begich. And to Senator Begich's right, we have former State Senator Mike Dunleavy. Let's give them all a round of applause. All right, so the questions the candidates will be asked today were formulated by the debate committee. In addition, the second portion of this town hall, we have had the audience submit previous questions during their online registration process. That way we're not fumbling through note cards, trying to read handwriting. But we've got 4 questions that the debate committee came up with, and then 4 questions that were crafted by audience members, and we kind of honed them to make sure that the message and the question was on point. The audience questions will be asked by members of the NextGen Aviators Group, and you'll notice they're the younger aviators in their blue jackets, sport jackets, and they're the youth outreach component of the Alaska Airmen Association. Each candidate will have a 2-minute response time for each question asked, and our timekeeper, Teresa Jensen over there, will be very judicious in holding up a 30-second notification and also a 10-second notification. And then once that 10 seconds is up, she will go ahead and ding the bell until the candidate stops talking. So go ahead back, Teresa. We'll give the candidates a couple seconds to finish their sentence after the bell rings the first time. And then after that, Teresa will continue to ring the bell. So finally, I'd like to remind everybody to turn off your cell phones, and if you have to take a call, you can do so outside. Lastly, a lot of people have asked where the restrooms are. So the restrooms are actually in the Alaska Aviation Museum. You can go out this door here. If you come down here to the over to your right, there is a museum staff that will be in there. You can use the restroom in there. So, without further ado, we will start off the town hall by letting each of the candidates introduce themselves and give an opening statement at 2 minutes in length. And from then on, we'll stagger each of the candidates' responses and who answers the next question first, going from left to right in rotating order. So we will start here to my right with Governor Walker. 2 minutes.
Thanks, Corey. All right. Thanks, Corey. Thank you very much to the Alaska Airmen Association for holding this in this incredible facility. I've had some good memories and not so good memories in this building. I'm speaking at a few services here, and this is a great organization, and thanks for all you do. You know, with 240 airports statewide, the Alaska Airmen Association is a big participant in the decisions that we make. You know, I ran for governor as an independent. I ran for governor as an honor to be the only independent governor in the nation. I'm honored to be the only unity ticket in the nation. Serving with Byron Malak has been a great honor. At some point we discovered on the campaign trail that we actually loved Alaska more than we liked politics, so we did the horrible dastardly deed of combining our campaigns and basically running against a two-party system. And if you're watching any of the ads on TV lately, you see when they're paid for by the two-party system is not real happy with the fact that Alaska has an independent governor and a unity ticket. You know, when we came into office, we inherited quite a challenge. It was one that was a long time coming. It finally happened. Governor Hammond talked about it. The price of oil plummeted. We had a budget that was the highest budget in the history of our state. We had to make some tough decisions, some really tough decisions. That's nothing new to me. In some respects, my time in Valdez during the earthquake in '64, we had to make some tough decisions there as well. So I'm not a stranger to that. I didn't quit. I didn't run from it. I embraced it. I made some of the most unpopular decisions any governor could possibly make in the state of Alaska. But I did that because I was focused on the future of Alaska, not my own future. And I appreciate the legislature last year finally taking the action that closed the fiscal gap by 80%. If they had passed that when we submitted it, we would have saved $14 billion. But that $14 billion will probably not be seen again. But you know, my goal isn't to necessarily do what's best for me. It'll continue to do what's best for Alaska. And if it's at my own peril, it's my own peril. When I say Alaska first, I mean Alaska first in front of me as well. And so that's how we make every decision. We have a nonpartisan cabinet, which I'm very, very proud of. But you know, I really came in this job to build Alaska.
Thank you, Governor Walker.
Sorry.
All right, let's move to Senator Bates.
I thought that was just music. First, thank you very much. Thank you to the Airmen's Association. I'm proud to be a member of the Airmen's Association. I've been for some time here through the company I own and operate. Now, I've been in this building many times, but also for the museum. I remember the first day, some might remember when Ted Spencer first started the idea with a group of people to do the museum. They had no water to it. And I remember working as a 20-year-old for then Mayor Knowles, and they came to us to try to figure out how to solve that problem, which we were able to do. But I've been in this building when I was a U.S. Senator more than once, bringing FAA administrators here to talk to about aviation, how important it is, but also making sure from not only a state perspective, but from a national perspective, people were aware of the importance of general aviation. You know, I got in this race because I just see the statistics of this great state of ours going the wrong direction. Highest unemployment, highest crime rate in the nation, 46 when it comes to education. But I also see in individuals when I travel across the state, the hopes and dreams. These young people who ask us questions, I'm sure in a few minutes, will see those same things. That we have to think about Alaska, not just in the moment, the 8 special sessions they had, all this back and forth and tug of war, but really about what's possible. This is what we forget sometimes in the campaigns. We're always about the moment, which is important, the budget, the BFD, figuring out what to do with crime and education. But it's also about thinking about what's going to happen 10, 15 years from now. How we're going to make this a state that we love, but also is for our next generation of young people. That's why I got in this race. I saw no plan of the future for Alaska. All I saw was increasing bad statistics. And if you want a great place and a safe place, a great place to raise a kid, raise a family, stay, retire, it has to be safe. It has to have a great education system. It has to have a growing economy, but all about the future of this great state. So I'm looking forward to your questions, and I know it'll be detailed aviation questions. I know aviators, it's all about their industry. So I'm looking forward to answering those questions. Thank you very much for allowing us to be here tonight.
And Mike Dinley.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here, and thanks to the Airmen's Association for putting this on, and thanks to my, I was going to say wingman, to my left here, Senator Begich and Governor Walker for being here as well. I've been involved with air travel for some time. It's an interesting story, and I'll be short. But when I was a young man, my brother, I have 3 brothers, one of my brothers at the age of 15, we didn't know this, was sneaking up to the airport in Pennsylvania and learning how to fly. He didn't have a driver's license, so we didn't know where he was going. He was saving his paperboy money, and actually learning how to fly it. And after you learn how to solo on a 150, I used to go fishing. My parents had dropped me off to go fishing in the summer when I was a young man, 14 years of age. And the only way I knew how to get ready for my mother to pick me up was he would fly over, my brother, cut the engine, open the door and say, "Mom's going to be here in 25 minutes, get to the road," and then take off again. And so when I came to Alaska, obviously, aviation is absolutely crucial. I lived in rural Alaska for 19 years, out in western Alaska by Nome and Kotzebue, and that's all we did was fly. This is where I got to know, for example, Senator Downey Olson and his brother Emmo, who flew Olson Air back then. It was, at that time, $45 a ticket from Coyuk to Nome. I think it's about $400 a ticket now, so times have changed. But absolutely, flying is an integral part of the state. It's woven into the fabric, and it's a crucial industry, avocation for many that I think we all need to be fully aware of and see how we can help. I jumped into this race because I believe this is a great state. I came up here in 1983 full of optimism and hope. The last couple of years has shown that without the right leadership and the right policies, a great state like Alaska could fall in hard times. Highest crime rate in the country, some of the worst educational outcomes in the country, highest unemployment in the country, one of only 2 states in recession. And the thing is, it doesn't have to be this way. With the right policies and the right leader in place, we can turn this around. With 730,000 people and the resources that we have, Alaska is poised, I think, to do much better, and this is the reason I'm running. So thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your introduction. We'll start with you, Senator Begich, with answering the first question here, and then we'll give an opportunity for the other 3 to follow. Alaska is a very aviation-centric state. It provides year-round method of travel across all the different vast terrain that we have here in our state. Aviation is also used for access for recreational activities, but is a vital lifeline for 82% of our communities. Access to federally managed lands and adjacent waterways is a primary concern for aviators, especially in light of a recent U.S. Supreme Court case between the National Park Service and a moose hunter in the Yukon-Charlie National Preserve. The question we have for you is, what role do you see the state of Alaska playing in access issues?
On both federal and state, obviously, all lands, right? I think it's important, recreation, maybe aviation for recreation, transportation, supplies, whatever it might be. It is, as I like to describe, you have highways, you have ferries, which are highways on the water, and then you have highways in the sky. I just went to Dillingham, and the importance of making sure we have the greatest access points. Not only making sure we have access, but accessible runways, quality runways, investment to make sure that infrastructure is solid, so when you are landing, there is something to land on that's at least somewhat safe, is important. I think the governor's role and the state of Alaska's role is to make sure that people do have access where necessary. But you also have to make sure there are parts of our state that has limited ability to get into for a variety of reasons. But I do believe there's a role for the state to play, both with its lands and the federal government's lands, to make sure there's access.
Senator Dunlap?
Thank you. It's crucial. Access is crucial for all of us. It's a fundamental right to be able to travel unimpeded. The issue with Alaska, obviously, is there's a lot of overlapping patchwork. It's an overlapping patchwork of land ownership. And we just have to make sure that we have the right to free movement within the state of Alaska. Obviously, when there's private land, we have to be careful as to where we put our plane down or we go across in a four-wheeler. But in order to get from place to place in the state of Alaska, we need to make sure that we have the right to do that. And in the case that you're referring to, the Sturgeon case up in Yukon-Charlie, this case is being looked at, but I think it's going to be fundamental, and it's going to set precedent for some time to come for the state of Alaska as to where we go, when we go, and how we go about doing it. We have a number of access issues in the state of Alaska. There are points where you can only go on foot. There are points where you can use a bicycle, and there are other areas where you can go that you can use a mechanical device. In terms of being able to land, I live in rural Alaska. It was crucial that folks were able to sit down where they need to get close to where their camp was or where they were going to hunt or their village. And obviously we need to take care of the airports, and we need to make sure that the airports in rural Alaska especially, but not just in rural Alaska, in urban Alaska as well, are well maintained and well taken care of. But in the end, again, I just want to reiterate, access is a fundamental right for all of us. Foot travel, machine, air travel is crucial, and we need to make sure that we push back on the federal government when we need to exert our constitutional rights and our state rights.
Governor Walker?
You know, when we became a state in 1959, the deal was that a certain amount of the land would come to Alaska, 103 million acres, but we assumed that we have access to that land, and we have access to other land. And that clearly we have spent a tremendous amount of our time and resources trying to get access to land that we thought we'd have access to. There are a number of programs that have precluded that from happening. Look at the number of years we have wrestled with the issue of access to be able to have developed the 1002 section of Anmore that was set aside specifically for development. So access has been absolutely critical. The state has a very significant role in that because we are the owner of the resources, and as the owner of the resources, we need to have access to be able to develop it. Whether it's for a mine, whether it's for oil, gas development, agriculture, we need to have that access. So we do have a significant role in the Department of Interior. This administration is a significant change. Secretary Zinke has a very different attitude than his predecessor, and one that has allowed us to get access for the Eisenbeck King Cove Cold Bay Road, which we now have permission for that. Access for things we want to do on the North Slope as far as permanent roads rather than ice roads. So we need to make as much advancement as we can right now because we have an administration in Washington that recognizes our need to have access to Tongass rule. I just appointed the committee members for the Tongass Advisory Committee, working with Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, about how we are going to have access to the Tongass for resource development, for recreation, for environmental issues, for fisheries. So, you know, it is a matter of access. We have plenty of areas of Alaska that are pristine and will remain pristine, but we need to have access for an economy as well.
Thank you. Next question deals with the Alaska Airport Network. Airports are a vital piece of transportation infrastructure for our members. Excluding Anchorage and Fairbanks International Airport, DOT operates 237 airports ranging from regional hubs with jet service, general aviation airports on the road system, to unattended airfields that service rural communities throughout the state. While the FAA currently provides over $220 billion a year to build infrastructure for airports in Alaska, it costs the state approximately $35 million a year to operate this system. This is after DOT's operating budget was cut by more than 20% over the past few years in response to shrinking revenues. Presently, the aviation community contributes about $10 million a year through the combination of state aviation motor fuel taxes, aircraft tie-down fees, and leases on state airport property. In light of shrinking budgets and increased maintenance issues, how would you propose to support the rural airport system operated by DOT? We'll start with you, Mr. Dunn.
It's an integral part of our transportation system, just like roads, just like the ferry. Just a quick story. As I mentioned, in rural Alaska when I lived there, that was our transportation network. And so we have to ensure that we have the funding for transportation. Under my administration, public safety, education, natural resources, and transportation will be the focus of this administration. So we're going to make sure that we have the money when we budget up front. There will be enough money budgeted in the area of transportation to take care of our roads and take care of our airports, all of the airports. And it's not going to be shorted. We're going to make sure that this occurs because I've experienced this firsthand, as many of us have, how crucial having an airport that's in operation work. I mean, there have been times in rural Alaska, in some of our villages, where in the springtime, when the ground is thawing or it's got water on it, you can't land a plane. So we've had to been diverted to other airports. Also had a personal experience where almost lost my wife and our last child because of a weather condition. But if the airports were not maintained, if we were not applying the airports at that time and maintaining it, we may never have made it out to one of our communities to Anchorage to be able to take care of that issue with my family. So absolutely, it's absolutely crucial. For me, it's a life safety issue, and they will be funded.
Governor Walker?
I think the question was how it would be funded.
Repeat the question is, in light of shrinking budgets and increased maintenance issues, how would you propose to support the rural airport system operated by DOT?
Thank you. Well, it's easy to say they will be funded, but let's talk about how they're going to be funded. You know, that's why we proposed a full fiscal plan. We have to find out what kind of Alaska we're going to want and how we're going to pay for it. You know, for 40 years, it's been like we've been eating off a menu with no prices. And now there are prices, we have to decide what we want and how we're going to pay for it. It's not a pleasant discussion. You know, to what I inherited, I ended up having to reduce spending by $1.4 billion. I had to close 40 state facilities. I had to stop funding 3,000 positions in the state of Alaska for state funds. 100 programs were either eliminated or modified. That was not pleasant at all. So, you know, now we need to figure out how we're going to pay. You know, clearly, you know, we are an aviation state. We are very fortunate for the aviation opportunities we have in Alaska when 82% of our communities do not have roads to them. So we need to continue to fund that. But the bigger question is, you know, how are we going to do that? You know, yes, we have reduced the deficit by 80%. That's a pretty significant chunk by reducing the budget that we inherited, by reducing spending, and by making a modification on the permanent fund earnings so that there's a slice of the earnings that goes towards operation of airports and public safety and schools, etc. We still have a 20% gap. The price of oil probably will be able to close that. We've come down from a budget that had over $100 a barrel down to $73 a barrel. So that's pretty significant. But we're not there yet. We're not quite there yet. We want to make sure that we have you know, we don't have to do the pink slips again. But it takes the full fiscal plan. It doesn't work on a bumper sticker. It takes a full fiscal plan where you sit down and say, how are we going to fund the services that we're going to provide? We want to plow those airports every day. There's no question about that. 237 airports. But we need a full fiscal plan to do that. And I'm willing to talk about those things, to say those words that the politicians don't want to say about some sort of a broad-based revenue of some sort so we can pay for this stuff. It's critical we do that. I'm willing to do it.
Let me answer with three pieces to it. First off, you do have to have a stable, sustainable, long-term fiscal plan. What we have for the state is not. It still leaves a multi-billion or million-dollar deficit, and you cannot hope and pray that the price of oil is going to go up and pray that's going to solve the problem. You actually have to have a revenue source of some sort to balance out the budget. The last 4 years, I wasn't in Juneau, the last 4 years they burned through $14 billion of the savings account, gone. If they would have put that in the corpus of the permanent fund, used the percent of market value, 5%, they would have filled the gap today. But they didn't do that because it was short-term thinking instead of long-term. Specifically on aviation, I propose an idea of a 6-year capital budget. Right now the state spends between 70 and 140, on average about $140 million a year of general fund dollars for capital. They pay cash, which will never get you the investments we need. I want to take 70 to 100 million of that, use it for debt service, put together a 6-year capital budget program, which includes aviation, roads, and bridges over the next 6 years that is funded through that. It would produce about a $2 billion plus investment into capital, which means airports and some of the major maintenance. Because what they do now is they have to pay cash for the major maintenance. Instead, some of this should be financed instead of being utilized with the cash dollars. This is how you first reduce the cost of the capital, also take some of the major maintenance programs and put them into real capital investment. It moves those dollars back into day-to-day operations. DOT in the bigger picture has to be looked at and how they do their priorities. They have priorities all over the place. There is no vision of where they're going on roads and transportation and ferry systems. We have multi-billion-dollar projects all across this state that do not have a direction of where they're going. We design for the next design for the next design. And DOT needs to have a shift in order to invest in projects we need to get done now, and aviation is a critical part of that.
Thank you. Next area is dealing with the structure of the state government concerning aviation. Short history lesson. Prior to statehood, Alaska had a Department of Aviation which combined the personnel who designed, built, and managed airports under a single department-level agency. After statehood, this became the Division of Aviation under the Department of Public Works until the early 1970s, at which time Public Works and the Highway Department were combined into the Department of Transportation and Public Facilities. Since that time, the responsibility for aviation and airports has been spread across different regions and divisions of that department. Aviation organizations have long sought a reunification of aviation interests within the DOT and public facilities, so that the managers, engineers, operators, and planners responsible for airports are under common management. While some progress has been made towards this end in the past few years, common management and career paths for aviation staff is still lacking. Would would your administration consider organizing aviation staff within DOT and your public facilities under a single division, starting with you, Governor Walker?
You know, there's been a lot of consolidation over the years. The same can be said about the Alaska Marine Highway System. It used to be a separate entity as well, and I think over the years they tried to combine and you know, for cost-saving purposes, and maybe that did save some money. I don't know. I hear a lot of input about efficiencies as far as or inefficiencies about what's not getting done versus on a cost-saving basis. So we have to balance that. Is there you know, I look at things that are cost neutral. That can function better. Certainly, I'd absolutely take a look at that. It's being proposed by Alaska Marine Highways as well as a separate entity, similar to the Alaska Railroad, which is a separate corporation. So that's certainly something that I'm open to. I got to tell you, we've been focused a lot on putting out the fiscal fire, and now that fire is out, we can take a look at what are some other efficiencies that we can, not just efficiencies, but also how can we do the job better. Sometimes it's not a matter of money, it's just having the right priorities for that. And there's certainly plenty that have said that Department of Transportation, it has grown over the years. It was, I think it's 3 or 4 separate organizations that have all blended together now. So maybe it is too big. I don't know. We would take a look at that.
Senator Baggs?
Well, I'd be open to it for sure. And here's my experience. You know, everybody, doesn't matter if it's this year, next year, 4 years from now, 8 years from now, anyone who gets into a leadership position as governor or when I was mayor, you're always going to be struck with fiscal conditions and situations that you have to deal with. The question is, as you deal with that part, you also have to look at the big picture. Where are we headed? How can you reform the way the government operates to deliver better services? It's not always about consolidation to save a dime or a nickel. It's about, are we delivering the services the right way? Aviation has changed quite a bit from those days, and there's a lot of change and opportunity that we should be looking at. Transportation is an economic opportunity for this state. It's not just a transportation network for us that live here. It's an important part of a broader suite of economic opportunities. So the simple answer is yes, because what you have to be doing every single day when you are running a company like the state of Alaska, because it is a company, it's a service company, it's 15,000, 18,000 employees. The bottom line is you have to deliver services every single day. And how can you do that better? If you are doing the same thing every year, more than likely you're going backwards in time. And what you need to be doing is thinking about how to move forward. And aviation is one of these pieces that I believe, you know, there's so much continual change, especially around technology, that we should be addressing and being part of that in the long term. So the answer is yes, but I would also make sure as you do that, let's say that's the answer. That's a whole new area. You do not want to lose touch with the transportation department because they're dealing with roads that may connect to these airports, and most importantly, connecting with the local governments and tribal governments that connect because they have infrastructure that touches the airports. And you don't want doing one project and then another project happening the next year. You need to make sure they're coordinated so you have a more efficient delivery of the projects.
Mr. Jones?
The answer is yes. So certainly look at that. And it'll be the folks in this room and associated with the aviation industry that will give input as to what that should look like. What can we do in government that will actually help the customers? And in this case, it's the aviation industry that we're talking about, folks that fly. If you try to make decisions in a vacuum without actually engaging the individuals that are the recipients of state services, you oftentimes end up with a problem. We've seen this with a couple of things. SB 91, for example. Without really engaging the people on the ground. You talk to folks on the ground now about crime, you get a whole different ballgame. I could ask people here right now to raise their hand if they know no one that's been impacted by crime. Nobody's going to raise their hand. We all have been. This is an example of where you have to make sure that what you're doing is going to make sense, not just in terms of the services you're delivering, but the people you're delivering them to. So you would have input into any redesign in how aviation is handled in the state of Alaska. You know, over the last few minutes, I've heard folks talk about how they've been dealt a bad hand in government. Trust me, when I'm elected, you're not going to hear me talking about the bad hand that I was dealt with. I'm going to deal with the hand that I was dealt with and make the best of it and help make this a better state. There's also discussion about full fiscal plan. That's like saying you have a full boat, but the top third of it or the forward third of it is lopped off. This is not a full fiscal plan that people are talking about. We have a $700 to $900 million deficit still. And really the question that people need to ask is how we're going to fill that. Folks at this table are going to talk about doing it through taxes. You've already experienced that to some extent because there was an attempt to increase your surcharge on fuel almost 300%. So again, yes, we should take a look at this, but you'll be involved in those decisions because what government does to people is probably many times more important than what we do for people. So you'll be part of that process.
Final question to this round. We'll start with Senator Begich. Do you believe there should be some sort of accountability report that includes feedback and performance for state programs and departments?
Yes. I don't know if I need 2 minutes on that, but you know, I've been in the private sector actually since the age of 14. It's been given me an opportunity to serve the public in different offices. But I will tell you, in the business world, you're accountable every single day. When I became mayor of Anchorage, one of the things we did was make sure every single department had an accountability. We had information that was used through what we call a dashboard, so I could see what they were doing, what the production was. When we put a certain amount of money into a department, we expected results, not just another requirement, another request. I think the state government has had a huge gap in this. I remember when I was on the Anchorage Assembly, we did the first school district audit. They thought we were crazy. How can you audit us? I said, well, we're going to audit you because we are funding you a sizable amount of money. We want to know where those dollars go. This makes sense. Plus, that data helps you understand what you can do better, what you're doing not so good that you need to change or eliminate. It helps you understand more of what you're doing. Plus, the most important thing is it delivers to the public what's going on. I know it's not Senator Dunleavy, it's his brother's group sending out an ad saying I raised taxes in the local government here. We did. You know what you got for it? 87 police officers, 3 new fire stations, 2 new schools, more roads built in 5 years than the last four mayors combined. Because you need to hold not only the agencies accountable, but elected officials. If they say they're going to spend your money in a way, then you need to know what they're spending it on and how you are doing it. So there's a simple answer, yes. But also what should happen with this information is not just contained with us, you should know it. And if you've ever looked on the Office of Management and Budget, State Office, their website on the simplified budget that's supposed to be for all of us to understand, it's the most complex document I've ever seen. It doesn't tell you in plain English, here's what they took in, here's what they spent, here's the results. That's really hard to find on that website.
Thanks. Could you repeat the final part of the question?
Sure. The question is, do you believe there should be some sort of accountability report that includes feedback and performance for state programs and departments?
Absolutely, there has to be. That's what I was talking about beforehand. The problem with Alaska has been we've been more concerned about the inputs, what kind of money and how much we're going to put into programs, as opposed to the outputs. As I mentioned earlier, we now have some of the worst statistics in the country, by far. Our educational outputs are terrible. Our crime outputs, public safety outputs are terrible. Our employment outputs, terrible. The investment into the state, terrible. We absolutely have to have that type of accountability. When the budget was passed this past spring, there were basically 3 press releases, one by the House, one by the Senate, one by the governor's office, all talking about different numbers. We're not even on the same page when it comes to the numbers we're using to actually budget. When I'm elected, we will be auditing divisions and departments. We'll make sure that we are not only just efficient in terms of money, but that we are making sure that the outputs that were demanded, that the purpose of the programs and the purposes of the services are actually happening the way they should happen. That's what's going to happen under my administration, so absolutely.
This will verify, Speaker Walker.
Yes, there needs to be accountability. Yet there obviously needs to be. There is some processes that improve, certainly can. But I want to respond to something that Senator Dunleavy said. You know, I don't complain that I was dealt a bad hand. It's just that it was set up by a former legislator such as yourself and your running mate that voted for a $7.8 billion budget, and then when we reduced it by $1.4 billion, you know, it was too much for you, so you quit and left the caucus, and you quit and left your job in Juneau. You know, it's amazing that those that were there for the run-up of the budget are the most critical of the fact that the budget now is too high. And you have said publicly in various debates that you'll fix the problem by cutting the budget by $1.1 billion. And I've repeatedly said, where's the $1.1 billion you're going to cut from the budget? Where is it going to be? Is it going to be from airport maintenance? Is it going to be from education? Is it going to be from university? Where's it going to be from? So, you know, to sit here and say that you know, you won't be complaining about the hand you're dealt, well, I tell you what, it was a hand that had to be dealt with. And I feel like I'm on the cleanup committee of a fraternity party that I wasn't invited to. I get criticized, I'm not cleaning up fast enough.
responses. Some that answered the questions, and let's try and answer the questions if we can. But now we'll move to the second portion, which is the audience questions. And again, these were pre-submitted by attendees that registered online. So thank you for submitting your questions. We had a lot. I will preface the question again, and then I'll introduce a member of the NextGen Aviators Group who will ask the question. So the next question has to do with manufacturing and product innovation. Alaska has a reputation around the world for innovation outside the box problem solving. Our extreme environment and way of life has forced us to adapt and overcome many hurdles that the rest of the world and the aviation community now copy. Aviation is just one example, right? Aircraft owners and operators from literally every corner of the globe want to adapt to commercial and recreational aircraft with Alaska modifications. To those of you in the aviation community, you understand what that means. So we'll start off with Kevin Campbell, who will ask the first question. He is a private pilot that's based both here in Anchorage and in Soldotna.
Good evening. While we have a small network of aviation parts, manufacturing, and modification companies here in Alaska, what support do you envision the governor's office being able to provide to these entrepreneurs to become global players in the aviation industry?
And Mike Dunleavy, we'll start with you.
That's a great question. That actually has to do with manufacturing in general and business in general. We again, my administration would go to you and say, what will it take to expand that industry? What do we need to do in Alaska to expand in that industry? Is it energy costs? Is it the high cost of healthcare? Is it the issues of crime? Is it the issue of educational outputs? We have to go to you as the experts in that particular field and say, what will it take for your industry to expand? What would it take to get more industries like yours in the state of Alaska? And that's exactly what we're doing in this campaign. We're going around and talking to different sectors and different groups as to how to improve government. Because in the end, you are the customer, once again, of our services. Our actions or inaction, you are the customers. And in order to grow these industries, we have to involve you from the get-go. What does it take to grow your industry? We'll be having those conversations with you to make sure that we put policy in place that actually makes it happen and not just talk about it.
Thank you, Governor Walker.
No, a couple things. It's a good question. We recently passed legislation that allows for young entrepreneurs to get started. It used to be $35,000. Now it's up to $70,000 if there's two on a low-interest loan to begin that process. But you specifically asked what the governor's office could do, and I'll tell you what I've been doing is I've been making access available for those that have a product or something they want to sell that's made in Alaska. And we took 50 Alaskans over to Asia in June of this year, and they made incredible contact over there with companies that were looking at buying many of the products that we have here in Alaska. So really it's a matter of access to the market, and be able to sign a letter, make a phone call, meet with somebody. I've had a lot of them bring investors to my office, and I'll meet with them and talk to them about the advantages of doing business in Alaska. The best advantage that we have in Alaska is our location. We are absolutely our location. Look at every involvement we've had in World War II. Certainly was our location. Certainly in air cargo, the fifth busiest cargo location in the world is Ted Stevens Airport right here. So we have the location. We just need to make sure that the entrepreneurs have the access. Last year we gave the Entrepreneur of the Year award to a 14-year-old young man who invented something while flying in his father's airplane after he rescued a couple of folks that were stranded. And they said if we only make a fire, we would have been fine. And he got home and he invented a little something that now is sold in Nordstrom's and REI that just goes on a keychain. You can start a fire. You can have a covering of some sort. So it is possible. Access is really, really critical.
Thank you, Senator Begich.
I said earlier, I'm a serial entrepreneur, so I know what it's like when you have several things. First, it's always raising capital. If you want to start a business or have an idea or a dream, and not all the time our bankers in town are very receptive to new ideas, so I think one of the big challenges we have is capital. And we do have a challenge in, when you talk to people who are quote, angel investors in our community. They're really not angel investors. They're waiting for the deal to happen, then they'll help you along. We have to create and kind of nurture that piece of it. The second piece is, from the governor's office, is clearly helping make people aware of what we have here, what the opportunities are. That's a big challenge. People have different viewpoints. You know, I just was over at an unmanned aircraft facility that developing some incredible parachute component to it, which is amazing. They've raised $3.5 million here in our local community. If they get monetized as a company, they'll probably be worth $300+ million over time, right here in our own community. But one of the gaps that's going to happen is, as you grow these businesses, we have to think about who's going to work in these businesses, making sure we have a workforce available to be trained in this highly technical and new innovative business world we live in. Our university doesn't necessarily have that. They have challenges within how they're doing their work over there. We have to really re-examine our university system and think about how to reinvent itself to make sure that it meets the needs. I can show you one thing after another. I mean, we have a great goal on renewable energy in our state. We're doing wind farms and other activities. The problem is the people who maintain those don't come from Alaska, because we forgot, as you build these, we actually have to have people that maintain them. And so as we think about these new industries, I think the role of the governor's office, as well as the state, needs to think about, well, you develop your business. What more can we do to make sure you have the people to work in that business as you grow it? Because we don't want you to grow the business at an early stage and then leave, which is what happens. So we want you to stay here. That's what I would do.
Great. Thank you, Kevin, for your question, and candidates for your responses. The next few questions will be addressing the ongoing pilot and mechanic shortage. As we all know, there's a huge nationwide shortage, an international shortage that we felt recently in Alaska. In 2018, Boeing Commercial Market Outlook projects a need for 127,000 new pilots and 120,000 maintenance technicians in the U.S. over the next 20 years. Aviation professionals training in Alaska understand our unique conditions and are obviously more likely to seek employment here. Now, the University of Alaska has some of the largest feeder programs into these employers for aviation here in the state. And with that, we'll go to Ali Barand, who is a control room manager, who will ask our next question. And Ali is there, she is.
Hello, my name is Ali. I'm an aircraft dispatcher and a flight operations manager at an airline here in Alaska. And my question is pertaining to the growing need for additional qualified, certified pilots, mechanics, and dispatchers. Are you supportive of bolstering the aviation programs of the University of Alaska system to meet that forecasted need?
Governor Walker, we'll start with you.
I am very supportive of that. You know, the University of Alaska is a critical part of our the fabric of our economy, but I'm also aware of other opportunities we have in Alaska for further training. Obviously, the AvTech does a lot on the maritime side. We need to make sure that we do it on the air traffic side. You know, as a state, you know, we were at 240 airport. Now I think we're 237. I think is what you said. The next highest in the nation is Oregon with 40 airports. So we should be that much more as far as being able to train the mechanics, the pilot training programs. I've been to an organization called XL Alaska, where they bring folks in from rural Alaska and expose them for opportunities in aviation on a training program. We need to grow our own. We just absolutely need to grow our own. And if anything, you know, anything we need the most of, quite honestly, in Alaska is pilots. It's one of the biggest shortages, if not the biggest shortage in the labor market. So pilots and mechanics and aircraft and maintenance facilities is absolutely huge for our state. So anything we can do to continue to incentivize, to make sure that program is healthy and viable, absolutely. We should be the center of the training in the United States based upon our percentage of airports versus what they have elsewhere.
You know, your question is a very good question. The last several years, the university has been sliced and diced on the last week of every legislative session. That's what they like to do. They figure out how to bargain away, and usually education is on the cutting block. So university's taking a big hit. The facility that's necessary, not only do we have a need for pilots, but we need for the people who are teaching the pilots. Because without those, it doesn't matter how many people want to be a pilot, and this is the challenge we have. So yes, I'd be supportive. But I would also do a couple things. I used to, in years gone by, I was chair of the Student Loan Corporation for 7 years. When it was on the verge of bankruptcy, we turned it around, made it profitable, got interest rates down to Would you like those rates? But one thing we could do, we should look at, and back then they got rid of the forgiveness program, and one of the ideas that people are talking about, I think it's a great idea. Look at where we have job shortages. Pilots, nurses, physician assistants. I can give you kind of a short list. And maybe this is where we need to incentivize through our loan program to put because it's an expensive program if you want to be a pilot. And so we need to figure out if we can offset some of that cost because we need those pilots. But the danger is, as soon as they work for a regional or a smaller airline, then the big guys come along and suck them up. And so we got to be real careful that when we do that, we're also making sure they make a commitment to fly in some of our regional areas. Because this is where we have great challenges. When you're in rural Alaska and there's not enough pilots, or the pilot doesn't show up because they've taken another job somewhere else. So it's a combination of things. Not only do you support the university, support some other efforts in trade schools, but also making sure that we have the resources to balance the cost of what it costs to become a pilot if you want to be a commercial pilot. So I think there's some great opportunities out there. It's a great industry and one that I'll be absolutely supportive of.
Thank you for the question. I absolutely would support a program that the university feels would help increase the number of pilots from the state of Alaska. One of the things we're going to have to do, though, is make this an inviting place, Alaska, once again, like it once was, for folks to come here and want to be pilots, and for folks that are trained here to stay here as pilots. And again, it's going to be difficult to do that if we don't get our public safety issues under control, our crime issues under control. It's going to be difficult to do that if we have poor educational outcomes for families that want to stay here. It's going to be difficult to do that if we don't continue to develop our resources. Alaska is different than a lot of other states. Sure, we can talk about taking $1 out of your pocket and giving it to him. But with all the resources that we have in the state of Alaska, we can grow ourselves. We can grow revenues in the state of Alaska like no other state in terms of our resources. For example, we have several 100,000 barrels of oil that have been recently discovered near the pipeline. We want to do everything we can to get that oil in the pipeline. Why? It's going to create jobs, it's going to create new wealth without taking it from your pocket, and it's going to create revenue for the very programs that we're talking about. We have to develop our resources to create new revenue. We have to get our crime situation under control, or we're going to lose more people. For the first time in years under this administration, for the first time, we're losing people to the lower 48, where the economy's doing better, where the public safety issues are better, where the schools are better, where the opportunities are better. And that's what Alaska's always been about. If we can once again recreate that environment where Alaska was the place to come to for opportunities, once we train these people at the university, or once we recruit these people from the lower 48, they're going to want to come here. They're going to want to come here and stay here. But we have to get a whole host of things under control because for the past several years, we've let things get out of control.
Thank you. Let's hold an applause if we can. Next, we have a question from Mr. Patrick McNally, who works in aviation logistics and route planning. Patrick, oh, there he is.
Hello. The FAA's pilot, mechanic, and dispatch certification requirements can be met without attending a traditional university. Would you consider making these scholarship funds available to be used in non-traditional secondary education tracks like private flight instruction and dispatch, mechanic, helper, or apprenticeship programs?
Thank you for the question. Senator Begich, we'll start with you.
Yes, and I'll be very personal about this. I did not graduate from college. I did not have the opportunity. I spent 1 year. My mother was a single parent. I had 5 other brothers and sisters, and I had to take care of the family business and other things. And so I did not have the fortunate opportunity to do that. So I believe, and I ended up chair of the post-secondary education for the state of Alaska for 7 years. And one of the things we always fought for was this diversity of education. It wasn't always about just going to a 2 or 4 year degree program. There were many other opportunities out there. May they be certification programs, short programs. I call them the 8 to 5 programs, where you're starting at 8, going to 5, getting your certificate, getting into the job market as quickly as possible. The type of environment we have now in education is so different than it was 4 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago. And we need to allow that flexibility, and I would agree with you. Because when you look around at the job opportunities that are here, I mean, you think of the trade schools that have incredible need and demand. Average age in the trade now is about 55 years old, so we're losing a lot of people. We don't have enough coming through the system because the way the system is designed. So again, the simple answer is yes. And I've worked in this field many times to try to figure out how to get more young people engaged, and then making sure they have the resources to do that, and making sure they're not penalized because they're not going to a 2-year or a 4-year degree university. So I agree with you.
Mike Delaney?
It'll be short. Yeah, absolutely, I agree with you. When those requirements are set out, especially from the groups that know what they're doing, in other words, from the mechanics, from the aviation industry, and they know what the standard should be, if you can come up with a program that gets the person, the individual, from point A to point B in the quickest possible time without risking safety and making sure that they have the skills and knowledge that they need, I don't see why we wouldn't do that. So it absolutely supports such a program and such an approach.
Governor Walker.
I certainly would support that program, but I'm not sure we have to wait until college to begin it, because I look at the career and technical education we have in high school across the state. Some of the highest graduation rates we have in Alaska are the career and technical schools, and from that education, some go on into various trades, some go on to college, go on into medical school. So it's an incredible education. The one in the Wasilla is about a 90%. The Matsu Career and Technical School is about a 97% graduation rate. The one in Fairbanks Hutchinson School is about in the 90s as well, because they're learning something. They're learning something that it makes sense to them. They're building a house. They're working on heavy duty mechanic skills. We need to have the aviation as part of that, so they can find that opportunity while they're still in high school. And again, you know, two semesters of CTE, career and technical education, increases their graduation rate by 78%. So that's where we need to start this in the high school level, and continue on with the apprenticeship program you mentioned. We have apprenticeship programs and certainly in labor as well. So I think it would make a lot of sense to have that in aviation too. So thank you.
Thank you. Now our final question from the audience, also following on this the aviation education theme, comes from Dominic Junta, who works in aviation education.
Yes, hello, my name is Dominic Junta. I'm a consultant for the Anchorage School District. We're currently upgrading the old shop classes to now include digital fabrication, such as 3D design and 3D printing. The question is this: STEM curriculum, science, technology, engineering, and math, are the buzz in education circles today. Aviation is a perfect example of an industry that directly benefits from these education programs. What is each of yours idea on how the governor's office can do more to promote statewide participation in STEM programs for students of all K-12 education?
Mike Delaney, we'll start with you.
Thank you. So my profession has been education, all of it in Alaska. I know exactly what you're talking about. The issue again, and you've probably heard, you'll hear other things from other folks up here about what the current state of education is in right now. The fact of the matter is we do have some of the worst educational outcomes right now. It's because we don't demand outcomes. We're just looking at inputs. How much money do we put into the system, and then we walk away from it without demanding the outcomes. Feedback, such as what you just gave right now, is going to continue to help improve the educational outcomes of individuals. Making sure that we are training kids for the 21st century, 22nd century even, and not for the 18th century and 19th century. We've got to make sure that any child leaving 3rd grade, and this is a benchmark, and research proves this, you have to make sure that any child leaving 3rd grade can read at grade level. That's number one, because if you can't read, everything we're talking about beyond that's going to be difficult. When it comes to STEM, you got to make sure that in 9th grade, by 9th grade, that they are proficient in algebra. This too has been research-based, that this is a gatekeeper course for exactly what you're talking about. We have to focus on those two areas, those two contents, those two skill areas, so that when folks get to the point, students get to the point where they're able to partake in some of the STEM and some of the career tech opportunities that we're talking about, they have that underpinning, that basis to succeed. You'll find that many of your students that don't succeed, many of the students that are in trouble, and later on, many of the students that end up in incarceration are students that never learned how to read, and are students that didn't do well in mathematics. So by focusing on those two areas, enhancing our career tech and our STEM areas, especially in the later grades, we're going to get the outputs that we need. And as governor, I'll make sure that we have those outputs, and working with groups such as yours, and you said you're a consultant, making sure that we have in place those courses and those approaches to get where we need to go.
Let's hold our applause, Governor Walker.
You know, as with my background, when I see a problem, I go out and put together a team and ask the team to bring me a plan. Give me a plan of how do we correct the situation we have. Last year I asked the Commissioner of Education Michael Dawson, to bring the plan. It was the Alaska Education Challenge, and he reached out to the education community like I think we've never seen before. Everyone from the maintenance staff all the way through the superintendent across the state to bring an education plan that is Alaska-centric. I said, don't bring in a consultant someplace from elsewhere. Do it from within the system. I think those that are closer to the problem are closer to the solution. So we used internal folks to do that. They came up with the Alaska Education Challenge. They had a number of meetings throughout the last year. They just released that, and it involves a couple of things. One certainly has to do with making sure the right things are on the menu, making sure we have classes that are germane and make sense to the region that we're talking about, and that's critical. The second piece of it certainly is the safety side of education, of the school system, those kinds of things that when they come to school they do feel safe, and that's a whole separate segment of itself. And the other is certainly in the reading side. If they, making sure by the third grade, if they're reading at an age-appropriate level at that point. So it's a combined effort that the teachers, the education community itself has bought into, and we're very fortunate to have that. But the piece that's really critical is that the community buys into it, that the community itself says, we want our schools and our kids to have the best education, and we're going to participate in that. There's some schools across the state where actually parents will go to the school. They'll actually go in, not to see if their child is acting up or doing a disciplinary problem, just so they can relate. And that community that did that, when they graduated, those 13 young people, all 13 of them applied to move on to higher education because it was a part of the culture of that community. We need to make sure that it's not an us or them. It's a community effort.
Thank you, Senator Begich. Let's hold our applause, Senator Begich.
Your question on STEM, absolutely, I would support. I did when I was in the U.S. Senate through many funding streams that we were able to put into place that helped on our local school districts around the state. But the power of STEM is also, when you think about science, technology, engineering, math, it's getting young people excited again about their education. Have you ever seen young people do a robotics class in a program? It's amazing to watch them and see what they do and how they learn about the technology around it, but the math and everything else that is connected to it. When you think of the young man I met, again, which village it was in, but a small village, I had the FCC chairman up there, and there's a young man, I think he was in 9th grade, making something through a 3D printer. This was years ago, so it's very new to me to see what was happening. This young man was just ecstatic about it. And I said, what are you doing? He says, I'm making something that we're going to sell at our raffle fundraiser tonight or tomorrow. And I said, tell me more about it. And then I asked him a simple question. I said, if you were not doing this, what would you be doing? And he just looked at me and he said, wouldn't it be good? I can tell you that. And I said, he says, this has excited me about education that I've not been excited about in all his years. He was a 9th grader at that time. This is the power of STEM. It's not just about what we need for the future generations of technology. I mean, just to run a fish plant, for example, in Naknek, a fish meal plant. Again, same thing. We don't have young people that built this brand new plant, all the new technology. No Alaskans can do it. They ship them in from outside. This is the kind of young person we need there who gets excited about that moment. STEM is not only important for our economy and the growth and what it can do, but it's also going to change our economy and also get young people re-engaged with education at a new level that we've never seen before. So I'm a big fan of it. The governor needs to be talking about it every single day as an important part of our economy, our education system, and the future of our great state.
All right, well, thank you to the audience members for submitting those questions and for the NextGen Aviators for reading those questions for us here tonight. It was interesting to see the trends that were showing up in the questions that we received. So lastly, we're going to move to the 2-minute closing statements by each of the candidates. We'll do this in the opposite order of our opening statements, going from right to left. Mike Dunleavy, will start with you first, followed by Senator Begich, closing with Governor Walker.
Thanks, and thanks for being here, and thanks for the questions. This was actually fantastic. I came to Alaska in '83 to a land that was full of hope and optimism, where folks were making a good living, the crime issues were not anything where they are today, and our educational outputs were actually better. Flash forward the last several years, last 3 years in particular, last 4 years in the state of Alaska, we have, once again, and we can't hide it, worst educational outcomes in the country, worst crime statistics in the country, one of only 2 states in recession, highest unemployment in the nation, a lack of investment flowing to Alaska. And so you have to ask yourself, this election is about choices, and you're lucky this year because you've got 3 of us and not just 2. You have 3 choices. If you believe in Alaska, and if you believe in the promise of Alaska, that Alaska, with all of its resources, can put people to work, create new wealth instead of taking it from one individual and giving it to another, then you have a choice in this election, and that choice is me. I believe we can get our budget under control without taxing it. Yes, I do believe that. I believe we can get our resources working for us to put people back to work. Some folks up at the table here celebrate the fact that there's more people on Medicaid expansion and that there's more people on food stamps. That, to me, is indicative of an economy in crisis. And again, when you look across the board, what you're really looking at is a management issue. There was no natural disaster that has befallen Alaska the past 4 years. There's no volcano, there's no asteroid, there was no earthquake. It was simply poor management. With 730,000 people in the state of Alaska and all the resources that we have, the lower 48 is passing us by, the economic miracle that's happening down there. And we are losing our young people. My wife is originally from Alaska. She's native Alaskan from up in the Kobuk River. We have 3 girls. We want them to stay here, just like I think you want your kids to stay here. And we have a tremendous opportunity on November 6th. You can vote for the same old. You can vote for the same old. Or you can vote for a new opportunity, one that's full of optimism and hope and putting our resources to work. Thank you.
First, thank you very much. Thanks for taking your time out of your evening tonight to hear from 3 candidates. And there are 3 good candidates up here. All hard-working Alaskans looking to win your vote and earn your vote tonight. You know, I want to agree with Senator Dunleavy. You're right on the statistics the last 4 years. Both Senator Dunleavy and Governor Walker were there the last 4 years. These are not good statistics. I totally agree. You know, when you think about where we are today, we do have 3 choices. We can think about going back in time, stay where we are, or move to the future. I believe in the future. I know why we're all here. We're not here just because of one little issue here, one little issue here. There is a common thread that does bind us as Alaskans. That's why we stay here in this great state. We see the opportunities. We see as young entrepreneurs and these young NextGen aviators here, what they see as the future of this great state. But we have great challenges. And what I've seen the last 4 years is the same old business. 8 special sessions, can't get their job done. No long-term fiscal plan that's stable and sustainable. This is not the stable environment we need to grow this state to the future. We need to be thinking beyond that. How to take our education system, not just add a few dollars or take a few dollars, but figure out how to reinvent it to really meet the needs of today. Not having a nurse waiting 2 years to get into her nursing program when she knows when she gets out she'll get the job because it's the fastest growing industry. Or an aviator who wants to be a pilot but there's no professors to teach them. Or making sure we have real comprehensive fighting crime plans, not ones that are made up during the election cycle or ones that might be made up after the election cycle, but ones that actually deal with crime in a real way. And also making sure our PFD, permanent fund dividend, is not only protected for this generation, but for generations to come. I'd be honored to have your support. I thank you for tonight. For more information, you can go to my website, baggage.com. Thank you all very much.
Since I went over my opening, I don't want to go over my closing. Thank you for this opportunity tonight. And it's amazing sitting here tonight when we hear about the unemployment and all this, that the people to my right must have missed the fact that we are the biggest fiscal fire deficit we've ever been in as a state. You know, we had to fix that. We had to fix that. And that takes political courage. I know you weren't there because you didn't show up and one quit and one home. You know, we stayed there and we fixed this. You know what was different this time? Rather than just get through it again. We've been here in the 80s. We actually fixed it. We actually fixed it. We'll never be here again, ever, in Alaska. I want no governor ever in the future have to do what I had to do. Never. And they won't have to because we have finally fixed it. We have brought the dependence on oil from 90% down to 30%. We can deal with that with 30%. We finally have made that shift that Governor Hammond talked about, that we're going to have to live off our biggest resource is our money. It was making 3 times more money than we were on oil. So sitting back, waiting for a rainstorm to put out a fire is not the way to do it. You got to walk up and you got to do the tough work. You got to get a little bit hurt, a little bit bloody, a little bit dirty, and I did all three of those things. And nobody to my right were involved in that. We had nothing to do with that. We have a high crime rate. Yes, we have a high crime rate. You bet we do. We also have a very high opioid drug abuse rate. That's why you should declare it a disaster. We have taken on all those challenges. I put together a team, I put together a plan, and we're addressing those day in and day out. So it doesn't fit on a bumper sticker, but it is a solution, and we're working on those day in and day out. So when there's criticism that, well, these last 4 years have been tough, damn right they've been tough, but really tough on those that stayed and did the work. And I do applaud the legislature that finally made that decision after $14 billion to say, yep, we're going to start drawing off of our earnings like Governor Hammond said. We did that, we fixed the problem, we didn't run from it.
Thank you to the candidates. Now we can applause. Yes, we can applause. Nice to the audience. Yes, again, thank you to the candidates, and thank you to their campaigns for making time for this forum. I hope it was all educational and helpful. To members of the Alaska Airmen Association and members of the other respective partnering organizations up there, and to the general public as well. I'll close with just a couple of housekeeping items. The Alaska Airmen's NextGen Aviators Group is the group that was asking the questions. It's the youth outreach component of the Alaska Airmen Association, which these partnering organizations are all involved in at some level and some aspects. So the Alaska Airmen and some of these other aviation organizations have a lot of scholarships that we give out. So if you know of someone that's interested in aviation and pursuing it as a career, or if you know of a young aviator who's already in the middle of their aviation education, you can tell them about the scholarships that these organizations give and encourage them to apply. Lastly, I know we're running behind, we're running out of time, but I'd like to take this quick moment to just announce that as many of you know and support the association through your memberships, but also through our Super Cub raffle, we're going to be those are the 10 new prizes this year. We're really excited to announce them. This is the major fundraiser for the association that allows us to follow our mission and adhere to it, which is to protect, preserve, and promote general aviation in Alaska. So that will be launched here in the next week, so keep an eye out. But in closing, thank you to our partnering organizations, Alaska Air Carriers, EAA, Chapter 42, Women in Aviation, the Aviation Museum, and Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, and Lakewood Pilots Association. Thank you so much. And thank you to our volunteers for helping check in and setting up. We really appreciate it. That's all I have. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to the candidates.